evening. I'm Ellen Treppe from the Office of Alumni Relations at Thomas Jefferson University. I am happy to welcome you to tonight's program where we'll discuss finance with our speakers, Lauren Gadkowski, Lindsay, and Linda Gadkowski. Throughout tonight's talk, we invite you to share any questions you have using the question and answer button located at the bottom of your screen. We will address questions at the end of the presentation as time allows. If you don't see the button, try moving your cursor and it should appear. And now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers, Linda and Lauren. Lauren Gadkowski Lindsay is a certified financial planner with 22 years of experience. She earned her CFP certification in 2001 and holds a BA in English from the College of William and Mary and a graduate teaching degree in secondary education from King's College London. Linda Barnes Gadkowski is a certified financial planner who started Beacon Financial Planning of Cape Cod in 1990. She holds a BS in political science from the State University College of Portland, New York, and a master's of education from Temple University in Philadelphia. This dynamic mother-daughter duo both began their careers as educators, so conveying complex information in an accessible, easily understandable way is second nature to them. Additionally, they are proud members of our Jefferson family. Linda's husband, Walter, graduated from the Sidney Kimmel Medical College in 1969, and her daughter, Laura Beth, graduated in 2002. Linda and Lauren, thank you so much for joining us this evening. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Ellen. So as she said, as Ellen said, yes, we are proud members of the Jefferson family and do want to definitely give a shout out to all the healthcare workers. We have been on lockdown here in Houston for a year now and a year tonight. And we really are very grateful for everything that all of our healthcare workers have been going through and continue to go through and do for us. Additionally, Linda and I are also what's called fee-only financial planners. And this is a really important piece for us because it means that we're not going to give people advice based on getting a commission or getting some kind of stream of income. We're very, very objective, and it's very important to us that we make sure that conflict of interest is not there. And the way that we work is very ethical, in our opinion. Like Ellen said, we're both teachers. And so we both came into this as kind of not our first career. And I think that does help to give us a little bit of background as far as learning this stuff from the ground up and explaining it. So tonight we want to talk about women and money. And Linda and I have been business partners in the past until her retirement. And I'm also the oldest of 3 daughters. So we grew up with a lot of these same things. And women do have different challenges than men. And we want to address some of those today and also give you some tools that will help you going forward. Ellen sent everyone an email that has handouts. We are going to refer to those handouts tonight. If you don't have them with you, that's okay, but just know that you have them to use at another time going forward. And we will talk about how we use them with our clients and how you may best use them going forward. Linda, did you want to add anything before I get started?
Done a great job. Welcome, everyone. And we're very pleased to be able to do this evening with all of you.
All right, great. So let's jump right in. All right. So why a financial planning presentation only for women? Well, the number one reason is because statistically, women are going to outlive the men in their lives. And I have worked with people over the last 20 something years. And there's definitely a generational shift. The younger people get, the more women are comfortable with managing money. But I do have clients in their 80s and 90s. And when their husbands pass away, they have never managed their finances. They don't necessarily know how to access things online always. They may know, I remember very early on in my career, a woman came in and she said, I have a box. And she said, in this box is every important document because my husband told me that. But she said, I don't know what they are and I don't know why they're important. So what we want to try and do is make sure that we as women know what we have, how to access it, and what to do with it. So statistically, at some point, you will be responsible for the finances in your house. You may be widowed, you may be divorced, you may never marry. I married pretty late in my life. And so I was very responsible for finances for a very long time before I met my husband. The average woman is widowed at 59, which is pretty young. So it is important to realize that that's a very big thing. The other thing that happens sometimes is you may not be widowed, but I do meet it with a lot of people whose husbands are incapacitated, maybe by a stroke or some other disability, Alzheimer's or something like that. So their husbands may not be dead, but they may not be available to do the things that they had been doing in the past. But we are going to outlive men stereotypically. Most men tend to handle the finances. I work with a lot of couples where when the women actually are the decision makers in the relationship. But I know that that's the exception rather than the rule. I do think that's changing. I think a lot more women are becoming more confident. And part of what we want to do tonight is to help you go ahead and continue to become more confident. Unfortunately, women are still making 82 cents on the dollar that men earn. Until we close that gap, we are always going to be at a disadvantage because that also determines a lot of times things like pension payouts, social security payouts. So we are at a disadvantage as far as not being on a level playing field because we're not earning equal pay for the same jobs. A lot of times also we may take career breaks to take care of children, to take care of elderly parents. And so because of that, we may not have the career track that our male counterparts have as well. As a result of those lower wages, we also have lower social security payments. Women generally tend to put others first. We're a little bit more giving, and I'm not going to say this is all the time, everybody. I know plenty of male caregivers who are just amazing, compassionate people. But we do have a habit of kind of leaving ourselves for last. And so this is something that I'm working on personally as well as professionally, is to just kind of say, okay, this right now has got to be me as a priority, and everybody else can go do their thing for a little while I focus on this thing that I have to do for my job or for my personal health. Women suffer financially in divorce. This is a big one. Women tend to take the house and hand over retirement assets. And unfortunately, a house is an illiquid asset. So if you are in this situation, I would strongly consider dividing things and not necessarily keeping the family house that may be quite expensive. And you don't necessarily have to make a decision right away, but like, don't give away all the retirement assets either. That's something that we see a lot of. And a lot of times women are not taught about money matters. It is, stereotypically the domain of men. But that's something we want to change tonight, right here, right now. What's very interesting is that generally women are actually better at financial decisions. Women investment clubs tend to do better. Overall, women are very, very successful at managing household finances and investing and making financial decisions. They tend to do more research. They don't have a problem with answering and asking embarrassing questions. They're not worried about their ego. And so they're going to ask what they need to ask. And for this reason, I love working with women. I'm a huge question asker. So do make sure that if there's something that happens tonight that you didn't get answered, send it to Ellen and we can get to it at the end of the presentation. Women do tend to be more careful shoppers. They do tend to research their items. I actually just did a Girl Scout badge with my troop this afternoon talking about how do you do research and reading reviews and what are the things that matter to you when you're making a purchase, and teaching them at a very, very young age how to be very conscientious consumers. Women like to diversify. They don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. And for investing, this is very important and one of the things that do make them successful. Women tend to buy and hold. They don't tend to sell off as often, and they tend to be less reactive about stock tips and market reactions. Right now, women are controlling a total of $10 trillion in the US. And by 2030, this number will be 30 trillion. It's largely driven by the fact that the men are dying. We see the wave of the baby boomers, and the women are inheriting the assets. So this is something that we want to make sure that all generations of women are prepared to do this, not just the ones in their 80s and 90s.
This is the next slide. What does money mean? We need to understand that there are 4 types of financial wealth. The first one is finances, having money. The second one is your social status. The third one is time, your freedom, so that you can do the things you want to do. And the fourth type of wealth is physical, or your health. So when we look at money, we have to put those 4 types of wealth, and wealth means you've got something left over after the paycheck. All right. So many people are living from paycheck to paycheck, and we've got to put that in order so that we can reach all of the financial goals we want to have in the future. What does money mean to men? Money to men is power. All right. Money to women is security. And I have to give you the caveman, cavewoman story because back in caveman's day, his job was to go out into the fields, sit quietly. That's why men can sit quietly and don't talk, and bring home the largest animal so he received the adulation of the family. That's how men shop. They go in, they get the biggest item. That's why cars are big, planes, trains, etc., are all big. For women, it's another story. We tend to be more involved in shopping. All right. Our job as a cave woman was to stay home, stir the pot, take care of the cave, and then go out into the fields and pick ripe fruit. And in this process, we then do very well in shopping, and we also do very well in investing because, again, we'll only pick the right fruit. So give yourself credit for understanding that that's how it actually works. What does money mean to you? All right. This is based upon your money personality. And again, there are 4 money personalities. The first one I call Penny Planner. She's very organized. She knows exactly how much money is in the bank account each day. She needs to get a little bit of opportunity to perhaps spend money on something that she would like as a goal. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I left my phone on. And the second one is IMA, which is short for I'm an impulse. And I'm is good, but when the blue light goes off at Walmart, she may go off and shop too much. So she needs to rein in her spending plan. Okay. And usually that means she's got to ask herself, is this going to matter 1 year from now? And if it's over $100, I usually suggest that you walk out of the store, get in your car, and then decide whether you want to go back in to buy it again. The third one is Donna dilemma. And Donna has a problem all the time. And usually she shouts it out and says, oh my goodness, I can't make my mortgage payment this month. And people come to her aid. And this is how she functions with her money. And the fourth one is Denise Denier. And Denise says, money, it's a nice day. Let's go to the beach. Social Security will provide for my retirement. This is the attitude. And she needs to be brought in to understand the realities of her financial picture and of her financial future. So those 4 money personalities have nothing to do with your IQ. You're born with this. Can you change? Yes. And we're hoping tonight to give you some of those skill sets that you may need to help you get to those points that you want to get to so that you're very much in charge of your finances and have that security that you feel you need. Because remember, our biggest fear as a woman is being a bag lady. We don't want to be that bag lady. We want to make sure that we know where our money is, how it's growing, and how it's going to take care of us. The word widow is a Sanskrit word meaning empty. And 80% of women will die alone. So the chances of you being alone and having to take care of your finances are pretty strong. Again, we tend to take better care of ourselves and live longer. And as a result of that, we end up being alone. So we want to make sure that we understand everything about our financial picture. And if we don't know it, we want to make it happen. What does money mean to you? Now, we each have our own issues. In my case, my dad left our family when I was 8 years old. My mother got divorced and remarried. So I went from wealth to sudden poverty. And then, of course, when she remarried, things got better. So the point is to understand what your baggage is and what you're bringing to the table. And for many people, it's either too much or too little, but you need to know where you are and where you're coming from. And that's your money story. And I can't recommend enough for you to have a financial advisor to whom you can share this money baggage story with so that you can understand how best to address those financial needs. It's just as if you would go to a doctor when you have a health need to address. So the same should be applied with your money. And that's to make sure that you've got someone who will do comprehensive financial planning. Because I know in my 30 years of doing this, we would talk about the investments for 5 minutes, and then the rest of the time would normally be talking about their family relationships or their job issues, etc. So those are the issues that tend to really make a difference. And you need to be able to have that person with whom you can share those events and make sure that they understand where you're coming from and what your money story is all about. Next slide.
Yep. It's doing.
The importance of goal setting. We have a handout for you on this. It looks like this. Okay. I'm going to explain this to you very quickly. We want you to choose 4 goals, no more than 4 goals. Okay. You want to rank them, and you want to put in your spouse or partners, and you want to do this without your spouse or your partner with you. You wanted each person to do his or her own and then share them. The best way to get along financially is through nonverbal communication. And because you come in with your own money personality and you tend to marry someone who compliments you, meaning if you're Scrooge, they spend. So you want to make sure that you get on the same page through nonverbal communication. You're going to check off these 4 goals. And then at the bottom of the page, you're going to write them out. So if my goal is retirement, my amount would be approximately 80 to 100% of my financial needs at that time. Okay. My risk tolerance, because it would be a long period of time, longer than 2 years, would be high, and the date to be completed. I can't stress enough the date. When you graduated from high school, they didn't say, take these courses and you'll graduate. They said, take these courses and do this by a date. When you had a baby, the doctor gave you a date and you went along with that date. You've got to put a day, month, and year on this, or it doesn't work. So it's this page, in my opinion, goes on the refrigerator for most people because they need to look at this and refresh what their goals are and how their goals may change. You've got to understand the difference between a need and a want. All right. You need food, clothing, shelter, etc. And then you want the big vacation, the big house, the happy times that you may spend doing things that you like. So you've got to make sure you understand both of those. And your time horizon, your short goals will be 1 to 2 years. Your medium-sized goals will be up to 5 years. And your long-term goals would be beyond that, 10, 20, or 30 years. And you need to have both of those goals in order to make everything work for you. Okay. And you've got to make sure you and your partner are on the same page, because if you're not, then you've got this dichotomy, which is causing a lot of financial stress. In my 30 years of doing this, the biggest issue for divorce was over money. Okay. And you want to make certain that either you keep separate. My husband and I have always kept separate checkbooks because he's more of the spender, and obviously I'm not the spender. So we have to always balance those two things out, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to have a common checkbook, that's fine too. Make it work for you, but make it work. And that the way you're going to make it work is to constantly be reminded of those goals. The importance is to reassess your goals annually or as life changes. This is tax time. This is an excellent time to be sitting down and looking at what your financial picture actually is. Now, the stock market's been up. You've obviously had some gains. So it is a good time to do a reassessment. But I do recommend that every time you're filling out your tax returns, this is when you say, are we reaching this goal? Are we funding that college planning? Are we planning for retirement? Are we reducing debt? Those are the kinds of things that we need to do when we're doing our goal setting. And here is financial independence. And financial independence simply means that you've got something left over after the paycheck, and you can then plan what you want to do so that you can have that financial future and that financial security that you want and actually need. Okay, again, it's to avoid that whole bag lady mentality. And you want to make sure that you're thinking about that at tax time, because it is important. And the importance and cost of health. I can't stress this enough. I have a poem that I always read to clients, and it goes like this: We squander health in search of wealth. We struggle, toil, and slave. Then we squander wealth in search of health, and all we get is a trip to the grave. So, getting that balance in life is the key to financial success. If you're going to be working 40, 50, 60, 80, 90 hours a week, and then your health goes, and then you've got to take all that money and spend it on making yourself whole again, you haven't done anything for yourself. So getting that balance in life so that you feel good about what you're doing, how you're doing it. And that means living beneath your means, beneath your means. That's a very important concept for us to understand. Number 6, please. The KISS method. Okay, how are we going to do this? You've all heard of keep it simple, stupid. So we've taken that idea one step further. Okay, this is known as the KISS method. So you keep 10% of your money for emergencies. Now, through COVID this year, you've had a lot of emergencies. Either you lost your job, or maybe if you were in the right industry, things have really advanced for you, but you've had some unusual experiences regardless. And you want to make sure that you put away 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses. We have given you this worksheet. It's a 2-page worksheet. It's called Income Management. I don't like to use the word budget because budget is like diet. It lasts 3 days. So in here, I would suggest that you simply round off. My mortgage is 1,000. My insurance is 500. My auto expenses are 500. Round off those numbers of just your basic expenses and plan to put 3 to 6 months of living expenses. You need 6 months if your income varies, 3 months if you've got a pretty steady job and you're pretty sure that that's going to continue. If you have commissions and you're living based on those, sometimes you want to go out as much as a year of basic living expenses. Now, this does not include the coffee at Starbucks each morning. This includes the groceries and your housing expenses. Okay. I love bankrate.com. It's a wonderful website to go to find money market accounts. Now, interest rates are extremely low at this time. They're low because we have so much debt. Okay. The feds can't raise interest rates the way they would normally be, so that you'd be making 3 or 4 or 5% on a money market account the way it used to be. So you have to accept the fact that you're going to get a very low interest rate, but you need to put this money somewhere where you can get at it were something to happen that you would need to get this money. Okay. But Bankrate is wonderful. It also gives you information for mortgages, loans, any type of thing that you want. Invest 10% or more for retirement. Some of the questions we got is, if I'm in my 20s, how much should I put? That's 10% of your put 10% of your salary away, and make sure if you can't put that away, that you put away enough to get the match. The match is usually 3%. So that would mean that 6% would be going in. If you're in your 30s and you haven't been able to save, then you should be doing 15% of your salary. And if you're in your 40s or more, it should be 20%. The trick here is that money goes in without being taxed. It grows tax deferred. You're beating the government, which is a wonderful thing to do. And when you take the money out, you're going to be in a lower income tax bracket because you no longer have a salary. So the tax on that money will be lower. So you want to invest that for retirement and take advantage of a 401k, 403b, 457, any type of tax deferred vehicle that you have available to you. Every single one of them has to have four vehicles for you to use. And so you can look and see which ones are appropriate for you on that. And if you do not, then if you're self employed, then look at doing what's known as a simple SIMPLE or a SEP, which is Simplified Employee Pension. They're one-page forms, they're 5 seconds to fill them out, and it allows you to put up to 25% of your salary away, which is, again, a wonderful way, a painless way to prepare for retirement. And you want to save 10% for other goals, such as your vacation, your home improvements, new vehicles, or giving. This is, you will find that I'm not a big fan of new vehicles. I'm a big fan of used vehicles. Okay. But it may be new to you. And the vacations and the home and all of that are lifestyle choices. You make those based on what you want, not necessarily what you need. Again, you have to go back to that need and want attitude and see what you can do. And then spend 70% on living expenses. And the one sentence I want to leave you with is every time you are going to buy a large item, okay, ask, is this going to matter 1 year from now? If you're I'm an impulse, or perhaps if you're Donna Denier or any one of those others, you may be out there and buying something because of the whim of the moment. You want to stop and think, is this going to matter 1 year from now as to how I have this? And I can't stress asking yourself that question over and over and over again, because that is going to help you become financially independent so that you can plan your future the way you want to.
Great. Now, the question that I also ask is this going to get you towards those goals that you outlined or take you further away from those goals? And it sometimes can be a very small purchase, sometimes it's a larger purchase. But if you start to get in the habit of saying, is this something that really aligns with my goals and my values and what I'm trying to accomplish? If you have that bigger goal, it can make it a lot easier to achieve it. So I tell people, dream real big. Think about the house, think about where you want to be. What does it look like? Maybe put a picture of it up on your desk to remind you. It does make it easier to stay on track that way. So just to talk about some good money habits. So Linda did talk about the emergency fund. I just met with a client this week and they said, well, we have this brokerage account that's invested in the market. Can't I use that as an emergency fund? And the answer is you could, because you could sell out on a given day if something happened to you. But there's two problems with that scenario. And one is that if you have a day down on the market, you may be selling out at a loss. And so that's not something you're going to want to do. The other problem is a lot of times there's a settlement period. So the money isn't available immediately. I live in Houston, Texas, and you may have heard about the COVID freeze that we had. And a lot of people had burst pipes, and it was basically whoever had money to get the plumber got the plumber. And I always have had an emergency fund because my very first house that I owned when I was 29 years old had a burst pipe. And all the damage to that house was a lot more than I actually made in a year. And so even though it was covered by my insurance company, I didn't have the cash on hand that I needed. And I can tell you, I have never not had that amount in my emergency fund since I decided that I was never going to go through this again. I had to borrow against my 401k. I had to borrow against my credit cards, had to borrow against my parents. I was 29 years old. I didn't have the kind of money that I needed to repair this. So having an emergency fund, keeping it in cash, and the 3 to 6 months is a great number, but also think about what's your sleep at night number, because some people will say, well, this is what my 3 to 6 month number is, but I really need this much to be comfortable. And a lot of times it goes back to your money story, and something happened like me with these burst pipes. And that's the number that's engraved in my brain. So the number that is the right number is the number that's the right number for you. We do like to have people reduce their debt and also to be ideally mortgage free at retirement. if the house that you're in right now isn't the house that you want to live in for retirement, maybe it's not as urgent to pay down that mortgage. A lot of people will go ahead and downsize in retirement, but having no debt, having a house that you own free and clear in retirement is a very, very freeing feeling, because you know that the bank can't come and take your house away, because you're not going to have an income stream like you were when you were working. So we do like to reduce debt and to eliminate that mortgage in line with your retirement goals as well. Pay yourself first, always. This is interesting because recently the government announced that the savings rate in the country is the highest that it's been historically ever. We are doing a great job of saving during COVID. And they did say that it's kind of a discrepancy because there are some people who are struggling financially very badly. But the people who have managed not to lose their jobs are actually doing a great job of savings, because we're not going out and eating, we're not going on trips, we're not going out and doing these fun things. So the money is actually accruing and actually piling up. If you can get into the habit of having a deduction from your paycheck going to your retirement plan or going to a savings account, and you don't even see it, that is the best way to build up that savings habit. And over time, and I think Linda would corroborate this, but the people who have been the most successful achieving their financial goals are the people who live within their means and have good savings habits. It's not the people who have the most money. It's not the people who have the best returns. Those are the factors that really make you successful at this game. We're going to talk more about estate planning in a few slides, but having an estate plan is absolutely critical, especially if you are on your own, because you don't have that automatic second person. Even if you do have that automatic second person, that's not to say you couldn't both be in an accident at the same time. And who's going to take care of our kids? Who's going to take care of our finances? Once you have a child, that is the number one reason that you need a will, because the will is where you determine guardianship for your children. If you have pets, you can do the same thing. I want the pet to be cared for by this person. You can actually leave sums of money as well if you need to. I'm sorry, that advanced forward before I was ready. But the estate planning is very, very critical to the overall financial plan. Having an awareness of your spending is also really important. So Linda showed you the worksheet that we use for income management with clients. And I will say, doing a will and doing estate planning documents are the most difficult thing that I ask clients to do, because confronting your mortality is very challenging. But the next most important thing is doing that income management worksheet, because confronting your spending is very, very daunting for a lot of people. They would rather just be blowing and going and not be too worried about where it's going. So for most people, if they have to track their spending to figure out where it's going because they don't have other methods, usually after a week, they have some pretty good idea of where it's going. After 2, they definitely do. By the end of the month, they can tell you where their problems are. So credit cards now will give you summaries of your spending categories. Linda talked about having a kind of financial summit around tax time. My husband and I do it New Year's Day. So we sit down and we kind of review the previous year and say, okay, how did our budget look compared to what we thought it was going to be? What are the categories we spent more or less on? And we'll kind of adjust the categories appropriately. So it is a really good idea to kind of have a financial summit meeting, but to also have an ongoing awareness of your spending. And when we see people who have credit card debt, it's usually one of 2 things. It's either there's an ongoing constant overspending, or something traumatic happened and they didn't have an emergency fund and they had to go to credit card debt instead, kind of like what happened to me when I was 29. So living within your means is incredibly important. Figuring out how much you have for take home, how much you have to spend on the basic expenses to keep the lights on, the roof over your head, the gas in the car, all that kind of stuff. And then figuring how much you have to have fun, because it's no fun if you can't ever have a little bit of fun. And then deciding what's important to you. So for some people, I'll say, well, coffee is a lot cheaper if you make it at home. Don't take away my Starbucks. That's my most important thing. So we look at other things that we can do. I love to actually purchase physical books. That's my great joy in life, and going on trips. So those are the 2 things, short-term and long-term, that I really enjoy. And I give myself a budget for those things on a monthly basis. And if it's too good to be true, it probably is. That goes for financial vehicles, that goes for financial advisors. Trust your gut, do your research. There are so many resources out there now that, we have so much information at our disposal. There's really no excuse for making a terrible decision. Do stop and take the time to research financial decisions. We talked a little bit about this a moment ago, but good debt versus bad debt. So think about, if you're going into debt, is this going to get you further towards those goals we talked about? So a great example of this would be student loans. Studies show that if you have advanced degrees, you have better earning potential over time. A mortgage over time is going to build up your net worth. Bad debt would be credit cards is probably the worst, especially the store credit cards that usually have double-digit interest rates associated with them. We talked about cars, new cars versus used cars. A car is a liability and it depreciates as soon as you drive it off the lot. So there's so many options for gently used cars. I'm a big fan of CarMax. So looking at what kind of debt you're incurring, and is it going to get you towards those financial goals, or is it going to take you away for it? So how did you get into the debt? And like I said earlier, it's usually either constant overspending, in which case you have to really go back and do a check and figure out, what do I need to get myself back down to living within my means? Or was it a sudden event? I remember when I was working in Boston early in my career, and there was a woman she was from the Caribbean originally, and she had two family members pass away within 6 weeks of one another. And so she had to fly very last minute to a very expensive destination in the Caribbean from Boston in the middle of winter when the tickets were the highest. And she said, this is where my debt came from. Otherwise, I'm just fine. But I had these two crazy expensive funerals I had to go to. So if it's a one-off thing, it's a little easier to dig out of. And especially if you can then go on and build up an emergency fund going forward. If it's an ongoing, it may take a lot longer to develop those new habits, but it is definitely a worthwhile exercise. Really think about how you can prevent it from happening again. I've had people where I've given them actually an envelope of money. Target seems to be a big one. Maybe some of you can relate to Target. It's very easy to go to Target and have things jump into your cart. I had a woman who had Target as a line item on her income management. And after a while, I realized that Target was such a problem for her that we put cash in an envelope. I marked it to say Target. And I said, when this envelope is empty, you cannot go to Target anymore until the next day of the month. And she actually stuck to it. And it made her aware of what was jumping in her cart and did she really need it, because she had these astronomical Target bills. Costco is another place where it's really easy to have stuff jump in your cart. So thinking about, do you have a spending hot button, and how can you go ahead and rein that in? If you are in debt, your two options are basically make more and spend less. So looking at your income management to see where you can cut back, but also looking to see in the short term, while you're trying to get out of this debt, is there any way you can do extra jobs? I was always a babysitter. And so even into my 20s and 30s, if somebody needed a babysitter or a dog sitter or something like that, just to help me kind of, make the mortgage payments and things like that, I would take on extra jobs in addition to my other job. Can you work extra hours? Can you take on an extra project? If there's a way to increase your salary and help you get out of debt, even in the short term, so, Christmas jobs and things like that, that's another option as well. It's a great idea to list out all the debt, especially credit cards, and the interest rates next to it. Once you have a list that you can compare, it's a lot easier to prioritize what debt you're going to go ahead and pay back. A lot of times, student interest, maybe some of the lowest. I have a lot of clients that have 2 and 3%. I've also have clients that have 6 and 8%. So if it's a higher interest rate, those are the ones you want to try and pay off sooner. If it's a lower interest rate, if you can transfer to another credit card for 0% for 6 months to buy you a little more time while you build up the savings, all those are great ideas. The lower the interest rate, the better it's going to be for you while you go ahead and pay that debt back. Whatever you do not make a late payment, even if it is 25 cents on the day. That's going to help your credit score tremendously. You can go onto annualcreditreport.com and get a free credit score, and you can go ahead and see, where's my score? How do I look? But making an on-time payment, even if it's not a payment in full, is one of the best ways to keep that credit score up. And if you have a ding on your credit score and it goes down, on-time payments over 6 months, it will build back up again. So that can be a very, very powerful tool. The on-time payment is definitely key. Online too, if you can do it, because sometimes it gets over quicker that way.
Investments. All right. It's not your timing in the market, it's your time in the market. If you miss the 3 best days of the market in any calendar year, you miss the market. So it's get in, stay in, and forget the hype that you hear every day when you turn on the news. The desire there is to make you either buy or sell, because that's how brokers make money. They make the money on the commission of the buy or the sell. The most important part of this workshop is the second one, time value of money, the rule of 72. I want you to write down the number 72, and then I want you to draw a line and put 10 under it and divide 10 into 72, and you get 7.2. All right, and add the word years. If your money is making 10%, you double your money every 7.2 years. If your money is in a credit card situation at 20%, your debt is doubling every 3.5 years. And if you're leaving it in a small money market account or a bond fund to have that security at 3%, your money's doubling every 24 years. So the most important thing for you to understand about investments is the rule of 72. It is the most powerful rule. When you see ads at night for cars and for furniture and those types of things, they're all finance companies. And they're interested in this rule of 72 because interest is attached to all of those payments. Make your goals based on your time horizon. If you have 2 years or more, your money goes in the stock market and it stays. And forget it. Forget the ups and downs. Every 2 years, we have a congressional election. All money bills originate in the House. And as a result of that, depending upon administrations and timing, you're going to have different changes that come about based upon the finances and the rules that they're making. So just understand and bear it, okay? Your chance of loss over 10 years is 0. Get in and stay in. Make sure that if you have liquidity needs, you have access to that money. We've talked about a money market account and any tax consequences that you may have. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. That makes a ton of sense. You want to have some in stocks. Usually the majority of your money long-term will be in stocks. A stock is a piece of paper that says you own a portion of that company. And a bond is a legal debt structure, which says that they owe you money over a particular period of time for a particular interest rate. You want to have some invested for growth, that's like owning a short skirt. And then you want to have some that's value, that's like a long skirt. Okay. You want to have a combination of both of those, because at sometimes we have more, just like we've had this year with all the growth on the Zooms, et cetera. You want to make sure that you've got both of those. You want to have short, medium, and long-term capitalization, because it's so important that you have these goals so that you can weather the stock market and the declines that come. It is not an upward movement at all times. It goes up and then it comes down based upon external issues. And we've all been through '08. You remember that one quite well. And there'll be more to come, because that is the way the stock market works. What I want you to understand is that the interest rate that you make is going to determine what the retirement plan looks like, what your investments look like. So that rule of 72, again, helps you to understand what it is. And make sure that you put that money to work on a regular basis. As Lauren said, you want to have it go in an automatic habit. Stay in that 401k. Don't pull it out. Let me explain something to you. Greed never dies. You give a 2-year-old a cookie, and what does that child say? I want more. Okay. So the market always comes back. It may not come back in the exact same fashion, granted, but it comes back because greed never dies. So make sure that you're looking at those issues as well as you can. And once you've got that emergency fund in place, you've got your spending plan in place, then you can do your investments and ride those stock market gyrations out, okay? Because they're going to keep coming. And with low interest rates, the market is even more powerful. So you want to make sure that you've got that in place. And someone had a question about cryptocurrency. I didn't discuss that here, but those are items like gold. No more than 10% of your money should ever go into anything like that. Okay. So just use that as a rule. And when you're taking money out, the 4 to 5% rule is the safe rule for you to consider. And then the next sheet is income management. That's one of those handouts that we gave to you. It's this one, the income management sheet. You play the 1, 2, 3 game. You put 1 next to those items over which you have no control. For example, the mortgage. You put a 2 next to those items over which you have some control, which would be something like your groceries. And then number 3, those items that you have total control, like a vacation. And you fill this out, and then you reduce all your 2s by 10% and all your 3s by 20. And then you've got a financial plan that works. And you'll see that Lauren mentioned going to Costco. The big, big, big expense because they make you buy 2 ketchups instead of 1. So they're getting the use of that money instead of you having it. So be very careful when you go to places like that and how you shop. And review your goals to see if they're in line with your spending plan. Remember the miscellaneous items, that's down here. And miscellaneous, the abbreviation for miscellaneous is MISC, and that's money I spent carelessly. So watch those very, very carefully.
All right, next, this is a big session. It's a heavy session. It's a heavy topic, but it's very, very important. This is something I talk about with a lot of people. And oftentimes clients will come to me because they have a situation with a parent has passed away, they have an inheritance and something like that. I can say 100% that the people who have planned for their death, and it's going to happen, it's not if, it's when, but the people who have planned for their death are giving such a gift to the people who are surviving them. So it is really one of the best things you can do for anybody who you love to have these documents in place. And like I said, I know it is not fun. It is not something that you want to think about, but it is something that can happen in the case of incapacitation and will happen in the case of death. So one of there actually 3 of the handouts that Ellen sent over are related to this subject. So I will talk about those handouts as we kind of go through this. So it's important to know that there are 2 different kinds of documents. One is a death document. So will be an example of a death document. An incapacitation document is something that governs how you want to be treated or how you want your finances to be treated in the event of your incapacitation. So car accident, a stroke, something where you are not able to make financial decisions. It's important to know that an estate planning document is a state-specific document. So if you have moved and you haven't updated your estate planning documents, there is a good chance that they're not going to be in compliant with the laws of the new state. It does vary from state to state. So if you know you've moved and you haven't updated these documents, or if you don't have them, put that on your to-do list. This is a really, really important thing. So the first document I want to talk a little bit about is the will. So like I said before, the number one reason to have a will is not just for inheriting stuff, giving stuff away to people, but if you have children, this is where you outline your guardianship. So the stuff is important too, and a will is going to govern your bank accounts and your house, your car, your jewelry, art, any sort of item that you want to go ahead and give to somebody. Now, it's important to know that if it's listed in your will, it's going to be assessed at the value on the date of your death. And so what some people will do is they'll give items before they pass away to people. That way they get to enjoy seeing the people with the items, and it's not just something that they then have to add to the taxable estate. You can transfer items to money, but also to charities. So a lot of people will go ahead and leave sums of money, stock, particular items to, museums, institutions that are important to them. And so this is a great way to transfer wealth and to carry on your legacy. I have a client, one of my very favorite people, and she is the last survivor of her family. Her daughter predeceased her, her husband predeceased her. And so she is doing a lot of giving to the university that her husband worked for, naming a building after him and things like that. Because there isn't anyone. She never had any grandchildren. Her daughter passed away before she married. And this is really, really important to her that the family legacy lives on and lives on to help this institution that was such a big part of their life. So it is a very, very nice way to have a legacy and to leave that legacy. The power of attorney is an incapacitation document. This is allowing somebody to make financial decisions on your behalf. So they can pay your bills, they can go ahead and file your taxes, they can gift money to people. And it's important to note that a power of attorney can be limited. So you can say, I don't want someone to have the power to do various things, change my beneficiary forms or something like that. So there can be levers in here where you can say they can do this, but not this. The healthcare proxy is someone who's going to make your medical decisions for incapacitation. The best healthcare proxies that I've seen also have what those decisions are. If I get put on a ventilator, for example, how long on the ventilator or what are the circumstances whereby the ventilator gets turned off. Same with somebody who's on life support for other reasons. So I do think it's important to have an outline about hydration, medication, feeding tubes. All of those things are things that are really helpful to have in the healthcare proxy, not only so that your wishes are carried out, but so the person who has to do them knows what they are. And I have a lot of people who will say, oh, we've talked about this so many times. Trust me, when you are in that situation and you're the person that has to make those decisions, those conversations do not come into your brain easily. It is such a gift to have it all in writing. Now, beneficiary forms are definitely a part of your estate planning documents. So any retirement plan, IRA, life insurance policies are all going to have beneficiary forms. Any asset that has a beneficiary form passes outside your will. A beneficiary form is a federal document and it supersedes a state document. So if the will and the beneficiary forms don't agree, the beneficiary form is going to be the one that wins. So if you update your estate plan, please make sure that you update your beneficiary forms. The number of people who I've met with and have ex-spouses or deceased people still listed on their beneficiary forms because they just didn't remember. Most of them are online now, so it is very, very easy to update. So that would be something to check on. You are able to go ahead and leave assets such as insurance policies to people, to trusts, and to charities. So if you don't have a spouse, you don't have an automatic heir, a charity can be a great thing. You can leave it to a trust if, for example, you have a minor child, if you have a special needs person in your family, or if you have someone who's a spendthrift, meaning they're not very good with money, there's a special kind of trust that can be created to have a trustee to help someone manage that situation. You want to consider your life insurance needs. If you are the primary breadwinner, if other people rely upon you for their standard of care, that person needs a life insurance policy on them. This is something that a good financial planner can help you ascertain. Do you have enough coverage? Do you need more? If you can get it through work, group is always going to be the cheapest way to go. I'd highly, highly recommend using an estate planning attorney and making sure they just specialize in estate planning. When I was working in Louisiana, I remember meeting people and every lawyer would say, oh yeah, I do a will. And I said, but what kind of attorney are you? Oh, I'm a bankruptcy attorney, but I do wills. And so I was real careful to make sure that I got somebody that only did wills, not wills and divorces or wills and real estate transactions. It is very important because it's a very careful subspecialty, and you really want to make sure the person doing your documents knows what they're doing. You may also want to consider the use of an ethical will, which is where you leave your wishes and your values to the people behind you. And this is such a gift. If you have the time and the inclination, it's really a beautiful thing for the people you leave it to. So those 3 documents that Ellen sent to you that are related to estate planning, one is an estate planning cheat sheet. So whenever you meet with an estate planning attorney, the most important thing they're going to want to know is who are your people and what are your special circumstances. I find with my clients that it's a lot easier to sit and talk through this before we get to the attorney's office. So we've thought that out. So in my particular situation, we have one person who is the guardian for my daughter. She is my sister, Beth, who's actually on this call. Hello, Beth. And we have another person who's a financial planning professional and a dear friend who is actually the person who would manage the assets for my daughter if something happened to my husband and I. So all of these people don't have to be the same. It can be the person who's going to be the best fit. It also doesn't have to be a family member. If you have a friend who's going to do a better job for you, that can be another way to go. We had a woman who was a nurse and she knew her husband wouldn't be able to turn anything off if something happened to her. And she chose her best friend, who was also a nurse, to be that person. And she was absolutely right. Her husband was an absolute mess, couldn't do anything. And her friend walked in and said, this is what's got to happen. This is what she wanted. And it happened the way she wanted as a result of choosing the right person. So the estate planning cheat sheet is a great thing. If you are stuck on a person, just start filling it in and talk it over with your loved ones. Do make sure that these people who you're going to name know that they're being named. It's a very unpleasant surprise to find that someone has passed and you're in charge of something you didn't know about it. It's not a wonderful thing to be named an executor. It's an awful lot of work. So it's good to pick a person who is aware of it, but also who has a good attention to detail. Another thing that is in there is a letter of instruction. I like to include this to just make sure there's any special circumstances or values that the person who's going to be carrying out my wishes knows about. So I feel very strongly that money should be prioritized for education. So that's something I put in my letter of instruction. And the last document is the funeral planning worksheet. If you are struggling to get your parents to do estate planning documents or to have this conversation, this can be a great way in, because a lot of times people don't want to think about their demise, but it's a lot more fun to think about how you want to be celebrated. And Ellen and I were talking about this before the call. She's from Louisiana. I used to practice there. And you may know that dying in Louisiana is a big party. And so when I started developing this worksheet, people had all kinds of very specific, I want to be, this open bar with this specific whiskey, and I want to have this particular parade happening. And so that can be a way in. But the other thing a lot of people don't realize is a lot of times people put funeral wishes in their will, and the will is read after the funeral. So this is a great way, again, to make sure that people can carry out your wishes. And it's a wonderful gift to give to those people who do have to make those terrible decisions for you at a very difficult time. So if you don't have estate planning documents in place, I would strongly, strongly suggest that you add this to your to-do list. Right now, estate planning attorneys are busier than ever because of COVID, you can imagine, but that doesn't make this any less important. So that was the slides that we have. We're going to go ahead and answer questions now that Ellen has put together, but just we like to always leave you with something to think about. So words to live by for tonight: make all you can, save all you can, and give all you can. And especially during these difficult times, so many people giving of themselves. And we just want to say how thankful we are and how grateful we are to all of you. And thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much, Lyndon and Laura. This was so informative, and I learned so much, and I learned about myself um, and my own personal saving styles. And so we have come upon the 8 o'clock hour, but I've gotten the official go ahead to keep this going. So for anyone we had so many questions tonight, so we will get through some of those. If any of you need to leave us now, we certainly understand. We are recording this session, and so this will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow. But for those of you who wanted to get through some questions, sit tight. We're gonna keep it rolling. So we had a lot of questions come in, not even just tonight, but also ahead of time. And people wanted specific advice as to, are there certain things that someone in their 20s should do right out of college and sort of into their late 20s? Is there something that someone in their 30s should be doing in their 40s? Is there specific advice for women at sort of different stages in their life?
I have a saying, a spouse or a house by 30. Okay. And so what that means is that you should be in a permanent residence by the time you're 30, because you usually take out a 30-year mortgage. And that would mean you would be 60. And if you talk to anybody in their 60s, all they want to do is retire. So for someone in their 20s, go ahead and make that purchase. It may be something small, but get that residence so that you are building equity in the house or the condo or your residence.
I would also add in your 20s to develop that savings habit. So you may have debt that you're paying down and you may not have the biggest salary, but really do try and carve out a percentage of it so that you're creating that habit of savings. In your 30s, hopefully your salary has gone up a little bit to prioritize, putting more in the retirement plans. You may start to build a family, so you may want to open 529 plans and things like that. But to continue that savings habit and to have it grow incrementally every time you get a raise, to go ahead and add it and to make sure that the savings is going up as much as your salary is going up is a really important idea. As Linda said, paying down debt and building up equity is going to be very, very important in your 40s as you're trying to, build your career a little bit more. You may start to think about, making sure that you have life insurance if you have, like I said, family members who are relying upon you. A lot of times in 40s and 50s is when people start to have parents that they may need to take care of. So you may have the sandwich generation and that sort of thing. So I do think that getting that savings habit very, very early on and continuing it and increasing it. So building up savings, so emergency funds, retirement plans, 529 plans, all the different vehicles that you can utilize. But if you can just start that savings habit, very, very first job, I really do feel like that is the key, is because then you've got a habit for lifetime.
Wonderful. So I was writing down a question so I wouldn't forget to send out some handouts after. Let's see. So we've had a lot of questions about the difference between IRAs, Roth IRAs, different sorts of funds. So could you maybe give us the 101 behind IRAs and all those things?
Sure, I can go ahead and take this one. So there's 3 flavors of IRAs. The first flavor is a deductible IRA. And the important thing to know is that these IRAs also have income limits to them, and those income limits change every single year. And they also change if you're single versus if you're married. So this is all stuff you can easily look up online, but to see what IRA you qualify for. Now, if you don't have a retirement plan at work, you automatically qualify for the deductible IRA. So the deductible IRA means everything that you put in there, and this year it's $6,000 that you can put in if you're 50 or over. There's another $1,500 catch-up provision. But you can go ahead and put all that money in on a pre-tax basis, meaning you put it in and the amount of income taxes that you paid is going to be lowered by the amount of your contribution. You do have to have income to fund an IRA, but you can have a spouse who works and you can do what's called a spousal IRA. So the first flavor is a deductible. The next flavor is a Roth. Roth also has an income limit. This is an after-tax IRA, but it's going to grow tax-free. And I do love the Roth because most of the time what people have are pre-tax contributions at work. And so the Roth is a nice diversifier so that you have some taxable accounts and also some after-tax accounts. Now, what's happening now is a lot of 401ks will have a Roth option, and that can be a great diversifier as well. It really goes back to, and this is where it's nice to have a CPA or TurboTax or something that can kind of tell you, how much is that tax deduction worth to me? Is it really important for me to be able to write off, get a deduction for my contributions? Or is it okay if I do it on an after-tax basis and then I have that after-tax pool that I'm not going to pay taxes on later on in life? Now, if you make too much to do a deductible IRA and you make too much to do a Roth and after-tax IRA, there's always the option of a non-deductible IRA. So this is after-tax money, so no tax deduction, but it's going to grow tax deferred. When you take it out on the other end, you only pay taxes on the earnings. So anybody who says, oh, I make too much to do an IRA, well, you may make too much for a deductible, you may make too much for a Roth, but there's always that non-deductible option as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. So someone asked before the session, what is the best place to park some funds that you could perhaps earn an investment, but be able to access them easily should something happen and you needed to pull that money out?
Sure. So I talked a little bit about the emergency fund. I strongly believe that an emergency fund should be held in a money market account or a high yield savings account. So very, very low interest, but you're not going to lose your principal. If somebody has their emergency fund funded, but they want to kind of put some money aside and have it grow a little bit more, there are all kinds of mutual funds in all the flavors that Linda listed. So you can have a stock mutual fund, a bond mutual fund, a balanced mutual fund, which is going to be a mixture of these things. And so if you kind of say, right, what do I think my time horizon is for leaving this money? That will help you to decide how aggressive you want to be. If it's 5 years or longer, equities or stocks are a great place to be. If it's a shorter time frame, you probably want to mix some bonds into it. And a lot of places now are offering these target retirement funds, and those can be a great option because the way that they work is you pick your date and they grow automatically more conservative as you get closer to that time frame. But a mutual fund is a great thing because it's a basket of investments, so it's diversifying the risk and has someone managing it for you automatically. So you're not having to pick the stocks. You're not having to decide when to buy and when to sell. So mutual funds are a great way to go. I also want to recommend Morningstar.com to research mutual funds to see, how are they rated? What kinds of things are in there? There's all kinds of information on Morningstar. It's free, it's online, and it's objective. It's a great resource.
Wonderful. Thank you. Someone else asked, considering that mortgage interest rates are so low right now, would you prioritize paying off a mortgage faster or putting that money into the market to grow?
Linda, you take that one.
Pay it off faster. You have no idea what's going to happen to you. You face what I call the big Ds: death, divorce, disease, disability, and depression. You don't know if any one of those will happen to you. So securing your home must be the primary place where you put your money so that that home is secure. All right. It's just as simple as that. You don't invest in the market. That's too much risk. You pay down that mortgage. If you make an extra payment per year on your mortgage, you reduce your mortgage by 7 years. So just keep making those extra payments to make the home secure.
Oh, let's see. There you go, Lauren. Let's see. There are so many questions. People clearly, this was a topic that really hit home for a lot of people. So we'll have to revisit it for sure. So I'm having trouble even distilling it down. So maybe one good last question is sort of to leave us all with and to think about. How do you determine the quality of a good financial planner? And then once you feel like you found someone, how do you establish an effective relationship that will set you up for success?
If it sounds too good to be true, it is. All right, that's number one. You want to pay for your advice. If they tell you that this is free and this is free, there's no free lunch in life. Grow up. Understand that you've got to pay to get good advice. You want to have shoes that last, you pay for them. You want to have a house that lasts, you pay for them. The same thing. And you want to understand how the financial planner is compensated. One way is to be fee only, and that's what Lauren and I are. We only receive compensation from the client. The second way is a combination of fees and commissions where they receive some sort of compensation for selling that product or service, okay? And then the third type is simply where it's all done on commission. And you have to make that choice as to how you want to have a financial planner. There are a NAPFA website, www.napfa.org. You can find fee-only planners in your area. Another website is FPA, and I believe that's .org also. Is that right, Lauren? It would be
I think it's .net.
Oh, .net. Okay. FPA.net, and you'll find other planners who belong to that association as well. But interview them.
Yeah.
Interview them.
And I
Okay.
would say if they balk at any of your questions, that's a red flag. Ask them outright how they get paid. And if they're very squirrely about it, that's a red flag that perhaps they sell something and they're going to make a commission by selling you a product that may or may not be a good fit for you. The other question I would ask is, are you a fiduciary? Are you serving in the best interest of me? Anybody who's a financial planner, who's a fee only financial planner, has to be serving as a fiduciary, asking in the best interest of the client. So the fiduciary and how do you get paid would be probably two of the best questions. Go on their website and see, what information you can find out about them. LinkedIn, research people like you, kind of stalk your enemies. But anything that they're not willing to answer, that to me would be a big red flag to move on and keep looking.
Well, thank you both so much. This really was absolutely wonderful. For those of you who asked questions, but we didn't get to answer them, I have made note of all of them, and I'll be sharing them with Linda and Lauren. And you all have my email address because I emailed out the forms tonight before the presentation. So if you would like me to connect you to Linda and Lauren, I am happy to do that. So please just send me a quick email. I will share contact information. We want you to get the answers that you need. Thank you all so much for attending tonight, and we hope that you will join us at a future webinar coming up soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Good night. Stay safe.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.